Oh, yeah.
Bonus! Hello, podcast family. This is your unoriginal host, Afton J. Thanks for tuning into our bonus clips. During this extra time together, I'll share interesting interviews and information that didn't make it into the final episodes. During the creation of each episode, there is always so much extra material, and I want to share it because it's really interesting. But unfortunately, sometimes we just don't have time, or there wasn't a place for it in the final cut. These bonus episodes are created to help you learn and laugh a little more. I hope you enjoy. The next two clips, we speak with friends that have careers in the theater. They have so much information about the theater, superstitions, and more. If you are interested in some incredible theater fun facts, stick around. Our first friend is a stage manager, and the second clip is the stage manager and her wife, the actress. Along with their dog Max, who is enthusiastically squeaking in the background, we get an inside look into the world of theater superstition.
So there's a lot of superstitions around theater, and saying good luck is one of them, and it's been replaced by break a leg, as far as I'm tracking.
Yeah. So it's interesting you talked about ballet dancers because that was part of the research. Do you know what that means, Merde?
Yeah, it means, so a lot of what you do in ballet are in French. So Merde in French is shit. So it's kind of like a weird thing. But as far as I'm tracking, that's because of like in the older days when we had carriages and stuff, there was all that shit that would be outside the theater. So you would say Merde, and that was kind of in reference to that. As far as I'm tracking, it might be totally off base, but I thought it had something to do with horses and carriages outside ballets.
You are 100% not wrong. This was one of those facts that like blew my mind. I was like, that's so crazy. And yeah. It's like such an old tradition, and people still do it today.
Yeah. It's kind of like the whistling in theater, and all that, and like not saying, like we always say Mackers now because we don't want to say the Scottish play's name. But yeah, it's like one of those superstitions too.
So is there anything that you specifically have a superstition about that you always follow for good luck?
Oh God, the Mackers one is big. Like, I don't even care if we're in a theater adjacent. I don't even want to say it. Like, obviously I'm not saying it now. We're on a phone call, right? And I have like theater friends who are just like saying it left and right. And I'm like, oh my God, please knock on something. And like, we did a show where we had TV and film people on our crew, and they said it, and then like everything that could go wrong on the show, like we had bullhorns going off, we had all this stuff, like things breaking, and I was like, just confirmation bias probably of like doing the thing. So for me, that's kind of the big one. Obviously we still say break a leg. I think that's more just because that's culturally what happens rather than it's a superstition anymore. Like I don't necessarily think there's anything bad if you were to say good luck in a theater. But yeah, I think the Mackers one is the one that's kind of held the most true for everybody. Yeah. Like and I think that's why, especially when you're working in dangerous environments, like people don't realize that theater is actually dangerous. I mean, if you're lifting a set piece and it's hundreds of pounds, like you don't want to drop it on somebody. And so I think it makes sense, the like no whistling thing. It makes sense that you're like, let's say break a leg, because all of these things, and it's just it is weirdly dangerous, the things we do, and you're trying to make things as safe as possible. And I think adding in a few like bits of good luck into that thing, I think isn't going to hurt anything, right? And I know there are people who scoff at it and are like, oh, I don't care about any of this, I'm going to say good luck 500 times in the theater, I'm going to be fine. And I'm like, I feel like you're just tempting fate. I feel like you're just asking for bad shit to happen in this run, you know what I mean? And I've had run-throughs where like when I was in Korea, I was stage managing a show, and every show had lifesavers, like the soft, chewy ones, and we had a bag of them, and we were passing them around the show. And we had a show where we didn't have lifesaver gummies, and I was like, yeah, I didn't have a chance to run to the shop bed and grab them. I was like, okay, no problem. And like, I swear to you, that show had so many things go wrong with it. Like, we had the breakers blow, we had just all this crazy stuff, and everyone looked at me, and I was like, I'm going to get the lifesaver gummies next time. And every show, I got those lifesaver gummies, we were good, right? And who knows? Probably not the lifesaver gummies, but it felt like it during that run, right? And so,
it was 100% the lifesaver gummies, statistically.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? But I was like, the one time that I'm like not gonna get the thing, I was like, yeah, we don't need gummies. Like, we're getting fat. Like, we don't need to be fucking eating candy all the time. And then the one run, I don't have that stuff. Like, all of a sudden, like, like nothing is working, right? And it's like, and that's the thing with like live theater, and that's the thing with military operations and sports, right? Like, there's just so many things that can go wrong. You're like trying to make it as successful as possible, right? So like, don't say that. Just do the thing to make it fine, you know?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Whatever it takes, lightsaber gummies or the keyword or whatever. Like, just do it.
Yeah. Just please get us through this thing. Like, I don't want it to happen.
So just for the record, because I should have started with this, I should have started with what you do. That way you're like more credible.
Oh,
so like,
sure.
What, you're not just some like random like theater weirdo that like sits in the back and knows all the
Super
things.
fan.
I'm a super fan. So what do you do in the theater?
Yes. So I'm a professional stage manager. I have had the huge honor, like growing up in LA, I always did theater in some fashion. And so I was always on crew. Sometimes I had to perform, which we're not going to talk about. I'm in LA for grad school for getting my MFA in stage management. And I'm down here now. I'm working full time. So, yeah. And so like, I think SMs, like we're like kind of technical people, but there's like an art and a science to stage management. And so I think that's also why maybe we're also a little superstitious. Like we just don't want to tempt the things, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You have a pivotal role in this theater production. Like, don't tempt it.
Yeah, because we're the ones that have to like, because I mean, obviously there is a whole team of people making productions come to life, but we are the ones that are in charge of making the final call. So if we have to hold a show, that's on us. If an actor goes down, we have to figure out a way to get another actor, like an understudy or a swinger or a cover in instead. If tech isn't working, we're the ones that are helping to troubleshoot and figure out the contingency plan. We also create a lot of the contingency plans. We also have assets with, you know, our technical directors and other subject matter experts, but at the end of the day, it's on us to execute. So I also am like, you know, if I got to be the one that's holding this bag when it all goes to shit, like, I want to make sure that I'm not adding more stuff for it to go wrong, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, that's so funny. It's yeah. So we're talking about like where does it come from, right? And I thought it came from. I would assume it would have come from the theater as well, like Shakespearean times, or like when, you know, all that stuff was like really, really in its heyday. It's not. All the research that I've done, they actually think it came from either horse jockeying or pilots.
Huh.
Yeah. So, like the early, and it all kind of started around the 1900s. I thought it would have started way earlier than that, but they cannot find either a literary or like a cultural saying reference to break a leg until the early 1900s.
And that was my thought, was like, I feel like we assume it's Shakespeare, but I was like, I know a lot of theater superstitions come from the industrial age. So.
Right. Right.
Yeah, it makes
yeah,
sense
you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like the horse jockeying thing, like it showed up in a magazine like, hey, like the most superstitious people on the planet are horse jockeys who like they need good luck to win. And so there's like a couple different things they thought the origin was from. Like one could have been like, it's either like, hey, like when you win, you break a leg on the finish line. So like it's a good thing, like, hey, break a leg. Like I hope you win.
Oh, right, because of the photo finish and all that, right, where the leg has to pass or whatever.
Right. Or it was like when you start, I guess a lot of the times the horse jockeys would, you know, try to like get as close as they could to the start line. And so back in the day when it wasn't such a big deal to like break the start line, you know, back before they had like all these like really hard rules, like you would kind of let your horse break the start line with its leg, like break a leg for good luck. So one of those two, or they think it might have come from German fighter pilots, which is weird. So apparently there's like a Yiddish saying, which I will not attempt to pronounce in your presence.
Why terrible like, Jew for not knowing the Yiddish thing?
I don't know. I don't know if you are. Like, I don't want to like say the word and you're like, Afton, that means.
No, but I'm wondering like if I call my mom and I'm like, did you know break a leg come from Yiddish? Is my mom going to be like, oh yeah, totally? Or is she going to be like, what? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm like, are we just terrible at our own languages? Like, I don't know. Okay.
I mean, maybe like maybe I should just pass this to your mom. You know, it's like a sniff test. Like, is this true, or are we like making this up? But yeah, so the break a leg thing. I guess I could attempt to say the word to you, although I'm probably gonna like 100% not say it right. But it means okay. It
it's like
might
also, you just got to say it.
Girl, I can't say that word. Like 15 years later, it's like still eludes me the pronunciation of this holiday, which I will not attempt at this time on a recording. Okay, So the Yiddish phrase or Hebrew blessing, namely, Hatzalaka Ubracha, literally translated means success and blessing. How close was I?
I mean, I think it was a good attempt. You know, Hebrew is a very hard language.
Yeah. Hit me with it. I take feedback.
Yeah, I'm not also going to say, because now I'm going to be like reported as being terrible, but I think we have to remember that Hebrew is like kind of very phlegmy, right? There's like a lot of huh sounds in there, and I think that is maybe the only thing you were missing. Okay. So what do you think I was trying to say? Hatzlaka Uraka. I can't even say it because now that you're doing it, I'm like, is this even a thing? I'm like, how do I speak Hebrew now? No, I do know what you're referring to, and that makes sense. I just didn't realize that related to break a leg. Like, I didn't realize that there was a correlation there, you know?
So this is where they think the correlation may have happened. So literally translated, that means success and blessing. Mm-hmm. It says Hebrew blessings often convey well wishes and positive statements, which is like super nice, right? But then at some point, some German dudes converted that, or they heard it. They either converted it on accident, or they heard it and they were making fun of it. Like, there's no real like point where it says definitively, but the German phrase is Hals Unled Bruckek, which maybe if I actually heard the correct pronunciation, they sound the same, but to me they don't. Which might have been a phonetic accent or ironic play on words, but that translates to neck and leg break. So pilots would, before they went to go fly, like the Luftwaffe, they would say neck and leg break in German to each other as like a sign of good luck that they would come back unscathed.
Yeah, and to me that's still tempting fate with both the jockeys and the pilots. Like, I'm like, why am I? That'd be like us, like as pilots, wishing each other like, hope you crash. You're like, thanks.
Well, yeah, but you tell people in the theater to break a leg.
I know, but it just feels worse when you're in an airplane. Like, it just feels so much worse when I'm not on the ground. Like, hope you break your neck and crash the thing into the ground. You're like, cool, thanks, bro.
Well, I'm glad that you guys can say it in the theater, but we cannot say it as pilots.
Like, I just feel like who has a better, like, I think if I'm worrying about statistics, like, I feel like more pilots die than theater people, right? And so, like, I think it's just, like, I think it's like it's more of an ironic thing in theater than it is with pilots. Like, I don't know, it just feels more scary with pilots.
Yeah, I'm just like I'd really like to know like where it started, although you know a lot of pilot traditions or just whatever, like maybe these guys were just like a-holes to each other.
Yeah.
Super superstitious. So and I was like there's no way that's true. Like, you and I both are pretty big into, you know, aviation history and whatever. So I looked it up, and a lot of the like German fighter pilots in their autobiographies, like, this is something they said to each other. I was like, no way, that's so crazy. That
I'm not going to say
true.
That's why they lost the war, but maybe we look into why that's one of the reasons why they lost the war is because they were So
they had to stop saying it, and we like gave it to the theater, like, we can't use this anymore. Punch to you.
Y'all take it. No one's fighting wars in theater.
Yeah, I was like, this is like, it was so crazy. And so like, it just led me down this like weird rabbit hole of like.
So now I want to ask theater people, like, I almost want to like go up to theater people today and be like, do you know the origins of this thing? Cause like, I feel like every theater person is gonna have this wrong. Like, I don't know.
This is the point of the podcast.
Oh, you know what's a big superstition in theater that I totally bypassed that we do to this day is the ghost light. The ghost light is a huge thing in theater.
A ghost light? I've never heard of ghost light.
Yeah. So there's a thought that theaters are haunted. BT dubs is kind of like the whistling thing. But there's a thought that theaters are haunted for whatever reason. And so you never leave a theater completely in the dark because you don't want the ghosts to take over. So we have what's called a ghost light. And as crew, one of our things we do at the end of every night is you put a light on stage that has like a little bit of illumination, and then you leave the theater that way. And so it's called a ghost light. And
no way.
Yeah, and so like a big like theater tattoo that people get, or like a sticker or whatever, is these ghost lights because it's such a huge part of theater. But that's a superstition because you're like, oh, I can't leave the lights off in theater. Like, I don't want bad things to happen. And so like I can send you 500 photos of every theater I've worked in that have ghost lights on them. because you leave it on stage and like you leave the thing on, and like that's always what happens. There's always some sort of illumination. It's usually a very like lamppost kind of looking thing, but even sometimes you just like leave like one of the side lights on. I've seen people plug in like fairy lights kind of situation, LED like strips, just anything to add light to the theater so the ghosts don't take over. But it's called a ghost light. And that's a big superstition too. Now I think about it. I was like, I missed one of the biggest ones.
That is so cool. I've never heard of that.
Yeah. So ghost lights are a huge thing. And that's like your big thing is like at the end of the night, you roll it out, you make sure it's plugged in, you make sure it's on. It's kind of part of like the last thing you do before you lock up. And then obviously when you come into the theater, you unlock the theater, you turn on the work lights, you unplug the ghost light, and then you go on with your business, right? And it's like a huge part of like what we do every single day in theater is the ghost light. Yeah.
Huh. Okay.
Yeah. And I'm telling you, I've been in theaters that I'm like, is the theater haunted? Like I was in a theater once, and no shit, like there were a couple times where I would be getting in and out. So the SM area we call from is called the booth. And I would get in and out of this booth, and you kind of had to like climb into it. Like I give all the booths I work in like clever names. So I call this one the tree house because you had to like kind of shimmy your way into it. And a couple of times I would get in, I feel like something kind of pushing me, and I was like, what is happening? And then there were times where I would turn on the lights or whatever to test them on stage, or I would turn on the sound, whatever. And then we would go to run a thing that needed the sound, and all of a sudden, like all the speakers were off. And I'm like, I tested this. And so like there was a few weird things like this, right, where I'd be on stage and then all of a sudden like something would shut off on me, and I'm like, what is happening? Like, is there like a short in the system or whatever? And then the owners, like the artistic director of the theater and stuff, were like, oh yeah, we have a ghost. And they had a very specific name for her, but I guess somebody was living in a room next to the theater, and they heard a lot of talking and like weird stuff too. And so I don't know. Everyone thinks theaters are haunted, whether it's true or not. But
is that because like people are like dying in theaters, or because like ghosts just like the theater?
I mean, I think I don't know of anyone who's died in a theater, right? I don't think that's the thing that's happened per se. I mean, I'm sure it has, like at some point somebody has probably died in a theater, unfortunately. But yeah, I think it has to do with the fact that these are all very, very old buildings. Like most theaters are very, very old. Like they are from like the 1920s. They're, or even older. If you're in England, obviously the Globe is still a theater, and that was around during Shakespeare's age. And so I think because they are so old, I think there's just a thought that ghosts migrate towards them, that there's just a lot of history there. And yeah, it's one of those things that everyone thinks theaters are haunted. So we have ghost lights.
That's so funny. Okay, well, yeah. See, fun fact. You just blew my mind. And that's why I love information like this, because it's always something that comes up. Like someone will say something that's like very common. You're like, oh, do you know where that came from? It's just like, and like it's funny because if you're learning this language, so they're called idioms, where you can't really derive the meaning of the sentence from the words themselves. You kind of have to know what the phrase is, commonality, to be able to understand what it is.
Well, yeah. And so like in theater, we have a lot of accessibility things we do, and one of them is that we put translators on stage for performances, so then that way people who are deaf, hard of hearing get interpreted performances. And so but I've talked with these interpreters, and they were saying that there's a huge difference between interpreting and translating, right? Mm-hmm. And like a lot of it comes down to, like you said, with idioms, like it's hard because you have to understand the cultural aspect of what you were translating, and you can't translate word for word, because we all know what happens when you put something through Google Translate and it doesn't come out the right way. You have to be able to understand the cultural context and all these other things to make it make sense to somebody who doesn't have the context, right? So yeah, it's all super fascinating. But like in theater, when we have these translators work, we sometimes have to make agreements. Like if in Hunchback of Notre Dame, like when Fifth Avenue did it, they put Quasimodo on, and he was a hard of hearing actor. And so they had to make like Esmeralda, Quasimodo, they had to make sign language for those words, right? Instead of just spelling it out all the time. And now those are not common parts of sign language. I'm not sure if everyone who does ASL knows that Quasimodo is this one thing, but at least in Seattle, it ended up being like a newly accepted word, right? And so it's just interesting how you can like impact things like that. So.
Yeah, that's so crazy. I guess I've never thought about it. Like if you had the term break a leg in a performance, instead of saying break a leg, the translator would have to hear that and be like, good luck. If they wanted it to translate correctly to the audience, which you wouldn't think about. It's just something that is very common in our language. And so that's why, I don't know, I'm really hoping that I can like find the time and the passion to really do this, because I love these ones, which a lot of them come from English, like the English, like Old English, and then they're translated, they come over to America or they're created here. But I think in different seasons, it would be very interesting to do other languages and their translations of idioms that we don't normally hear here in America.
Yeah, for sure. Because like if you think about even just how much English is seeped into Christian culture, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there are cultures that like don't have hell, right? So we say go to hell, and that's a very common meaning. But then what do you do with a culture that doesn't have hell, right? And there are other ways in which that same meaning is infused, but they don't say go to hell. Like obviously Jewish people don't technically say go to hell. It's not like a thing. So yeah, so it just depends on the things, and like it's interesting how it also changes when you have different languages thrown into the mix. So yeah. So I'm like, I really want to do this. I love it. So we'll see. I love you. I hope you have an amazing week. Awesome. Thanks, girl. You're the best. Give everyone hugs for me.
Do you work in theater, and what do you do in theater?
Yes, I work in theater. I am a director, playwright, actor, and theater teacher.
Great. And where do you think the original origin of the saying break a leg comes from?
Actually, it's a very contested origin story. The most common one, and one of the ones I learned, dates back to early stages in which there was a rake or an angle to the stage, and when actors would get into their performance and move slowly down towards closer to the audience, there was a space between where the stage and the audience was, and they would fall because they were so into their performance. Hence, breaking a leg meant you're like really into your performance. You're doing like supposedly really well.
Oh, I had never actually heard that. That's fascinating. And that's because in London, right, all the stages are super raked, right?
I suppose so. Because also we have to remember, theater was not just a European thing. Like, theater started as a religious ritual for the Greeks, right? And so actually what we consider a theater space is also a little bit contested.
Do you have any personal superstitions, and do you have any theater-specific superstitions?
Ooh. Yes. You don't say the Scottish play's real name on stage.
Oh my God, I said the same thing. I was like, Mackers. I don't even say it outside the theater.
Nope. Well, if I'm in a theater space, a performance space, that's usually when I make sure not to say it.
I don't even say it in our house. I don't want to invite that in.
It's also make sure a ghost light always goes on.
And what is the ghost light? Okay,
so a ghost light is typically usually just some sort of lamp, or really kind of like any light that must stay on even after everyone has left the space, because one of the superstitions that's related to it is that there are theater ghosts. So again, different origin stories, but you know, like ghosts of past performers who have been in that space or who died in that space. I don't actually know. But the idea is that the theater ghosts need light, and that it is good luck to keep those lights on.
And we don't say good luck, we say break a leg, right?
You say break a leg, you say merde, which is
more like ballet, right?
In French.
What does merde stand for?
It's a swear. I'm pretty sure it's the F word equivalent.
I thought it was the S word equivalent.
Oh, I don't know.
Babe, you speak French.
Uh-oh. I know it in a theater context.
And what is the point of it, though?
The point of it is, again, to avoid saying good luck. And it's like, you know, have a great performance, get really into it, right? Like, that it's so good, you're like, swear word, it's so good. Oh, whistling in a theater space. That's considered bad luck. Again, origins of before fancy automation. Whoever is operating
the flyman,
these flies would communicate via whistle. So if you accidentally give that signal that it's not supposed to be
dropped, then it will drop. Yeah,
it will drop. You will die. Supposedly, that is That is the thing.
Any other theater superstitions? Do you have any specific ones? Like I was talking about, like even two-doche, right? We don't say two-show day, we say two-doche.
Oh yeah. I personally don't ever say, oh, wow, it's gonna be a good house tonight, or oh, it's gonna be a small audience tonight, or it's gonna be an easy show. Like I avoid that.
Oh, that's smart. I haven't thought of that, but that's true. You want to be like, because you'll say have a good show, but you're not like it's going to be a blank. It's going to be a good show. Yeah.
Theater superstition, less superstition, I think, but I guess maybe ritual. I do not read reviews on the day they come out. I usually wait until after the show.
So you're one of those that doesn't like to know about the reviews while the show is running?
Absolutely not. I don't like to know if there are press in the audience.
Or famous people.
I don't care about that. My personal superstition is that there just has to be a very specific few like warm-up exercises that I must do. It depends on the show and on the character, but it usually involves some sort of like vocal and physical warm-up, and I always want to greet the space, because going back to the ghost light and like theater ghosts, or if there are resident like spirits in your space, I always try to make good friends with them, so you always greet them hello and goodbye. That's my biggest theater superstition. Yeah.
Thank you, Max.
Thank you, Max, so much.
All right.
That's a wrap for today. I'll leave you here with these intellectual snacks to think about. And you can tell me what you think by leaving us a comment on the podcast or sending us an email to myunoriginalthoughtpodcast@gmail.com. I want to hear from you. And as always, like and subscribe to the podcast so you'll never miss a new episode. We'll see you next time. And as always, keep being inquisitive.